What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Stacking the Box College Football Edition. Happy New Year. Happy National Championship Week. We are on the heels of one of the most memorable college football playoff semifinal games won by Michigan and Washington, setting up a somewhat surprising but epic national championship game, nonetheless, between Michigan and Washington next Monday. And to break down what just happened this past Monday on New Year's Day and to forecast what's going to happen next Monday night, I'm your host, Reed Wallach, joined as always by Cody Williams. Cody, Happy New Year. I'm sorry for your Texas loss, but how's it going, man?
Happy New Year, Reed. Texas loss. At least it's not. At least I'm not a Texas fan. That would if I had put my entire wagon on Texas, then I'd be feeling a whole lot worse. But man, I'm as a football fan, as someone without really a dog in the fight, that was one of the best semifinals, like pair of semifinals we've had in the college football playoff era to this point.
Yeah, talking about the games in the lead up, obviously on this show, but also just around the holiday time, talking about it with like some family members and some other people that I came across, just talking about in the lead up to it, the difference in styles between the two games specifically. And I think we did a good job of hinting on that between like more of an old school physical battle between Michigan and Alabama, and then more like high explosive play, talent on the outside, deep shots in the Texas Washington game. And I think that played out that way too. But like you said, two awesome games. And it's always nice though when games are billed as we don't really know what's going to happen and they're going to be really good and they're going to be cool to see, and for them to really deliver in the manner that they did. Both games going down to the very last play, both games back and forth. So much to unpack, and we're not going to spend too much time talking about what did happen, and we're going to talk a lot about what's going to happen in the national championship game. But Cody, let's start with the Rose Bowl. Michigan avoids some unfortunate miscues to rally late, win in overtime, 27-20, knock off Alabama to go to the national championship. The Wolverines' first time winning a college football playoff game after coming up short the prior two seasons. Cody, what were some of your takeaways from the Wolverines' come from behind victory?
I think my first major overarching takeaway was the maturation of JJ McCarthy and in turn Jim Harbaugh as well from last season, because first passing play of the game, JJ McCarthy almost throws a pick to Caleb Downs, but he comes from out of bounds to catch it, so it gets overturned. And I was thinking, when I saw that happen, and then they go 3 and out anyway, they don't do anything with the drive. I was thinking, oh no, it's the TCU game all over again, because they fell behind TCU and then kind of got everything going right and weren't able to come back. And I was like, oh no, here we go again. But McCarthy and Harbaugh showed a lot of poise. Sharon Moore showed a lot of poise as a play caller. And it looked to me, I think, frankly, that Michigan was just the better team. And what surprised me the most, was the better coach team in the Rose Bowl, because it felt like Michigan made 3 mistakes for every 1 mistake that Alabama made. Michigan could not get out of its own way. And if Michigan played mistake-free football, that game might be a blowout. But for them to overcome all of that really is a testament to the maturation that I think this team has, undergone over the past couple of years.
It definitely felt like a team coming to grips with its own success, like trying to get out of its own way. And some people, and myself included, mentioned like getting over the hump. Michigan come up short 2 years prior in the semifinals, and this is a team that for the first time really had a stranglehold on this game, especially from like the second quarter to the middle of the third, but just a few boneheaded mistakes, really uncharacteristic of a disciplined veteran Michigan team. It felt like they were kind of battling their own inner demons out there. And then they finally, down the stretch, really jump-started by that 4th and 2 play call. Blake Corum goes upfield, which was also met with a mistake. Roman Wilson gets a block in the back penalty.
Right.
But that jump-started the drive, and Michigan kind of found its footing at the right time to secure a victory. But I agree with you 100%. I think Michigan was the better team. I think Alabama, I think they were outgunned, and I think that the coaches did a pretty good job in the second half of maybe going a little more max protection for Jalen Milroe, a little more side-to-side running instead of like kind of going through the gaps. I think that did a good job to win the field position battle, but ultimately the talent prevailed with Michigan and the better team won. But again, they didn't make it easy for themselves.
No.
For sure. But no, I mean, seriously, it was a great game. A lot of high drama. I don't think it probably should have been that close.
No.
And before that last drive where it felt like Michigan, it was obviously like do or die time for them. It felt like, at least I was thinking that, wow, they're really going to blow this one. Like, this is one that's really going to sting if you lose. Because there's one thing if you lose to Georgia 2 years ago, or maybe you just get outplayed thoroughly by TCU, who brings like these explosive weapons, but like you're playing on your terms, this low scoring physical battle, and you're really, really controlling the game. To lose that one really would have hurt. So credit to Michigan for finding their stride at the right time and getting over the hump. Before we get on to the Sugar Bowl, any other thoughts that you wanted to mention from the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, you mentioned that, Alabama really started max protecting for Jalen Milroe because, in the first half, the right side or the left side of Alabama's offensive line got their lunch ate every single play. Like Milroe had someone in his laps where he couldn't even use his mobility. Like his mobility was a non-factor essentially in the first half because they were in his lap before he could even think about taking off. And while I do think they did a good job of adjusting to the max protect, I still felt like Tommy Rees's game plan. Like Tommy Rees came out of here as a stock down, in my opinion, after this game, just because, yes, you fixed the protection issues a little bit, but it still felt like the Alabama offense never made things easy on themselves. Like in the first half when, they were having trouble protecting Milroe, I thought, okay, maybe just, quick screens to like Isaiah Bond or Jermaine Burton and some of these plays, like just plays to get the ball out quick and get the, momentum a little bit on your side and get Michigan on its heels a little bit. And there was none of that. And I felt like even in the second half when they adjusted, we still didn't see enough of that to really have Alabama get any momentum. And against the talented a defense as talented as Michigan, that's going to dig yourself a hole every single time, even if like you're capitalizing on mistakes.
Yeah, I think, and this is part of what we were talking about in the preview of these two games, I thought Michigan was the better team, and I just didn't see a ton of avenues for Alabama to move the ball. I think I trusted Michigan a little bit more. I don't know if the game necessarily played out exactly how I thought. Obviously, with so many special teams blunders for Michigan, that was kind of the story of the game. But I really wasn't sold with Alabama. I was to a certain extent in the lead up to the Georgia game. I didn't really think they were going to beat Georgia. I just thought that they lacked the consistent offensive threats, but it's been the theme of the show. Anytime we talk about Alabama, I would say they're not good at long sustaining drives. They're not really good at stringing together these 10-play march down the fields. They're big play merchants. They get Milroe either in the pocket or he escapes from the pocket, extends plays and makes the plays downfield. He's a great downfield passer. He had no time. The defensive line was absolutely destructive for Michigan. It was the best unit on the field of any besides Alabama's special teams unit. I wasn't that surprised with Alabama's struggles on offense. And I know they got the side-to-side game going, but even then, they cashed in on, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but they cashed in on a relatively short field. They were around their own like 40 when they scored to start the fourth quarter. That wasn't like a really long drive. And the other scoring drive they had in the second half was stunned when Michigan they like stopped a bubble screen to Burden and they sacked Milroe to make it like a 52-yarder for Reichard, which he obviously drilled because
he's nails, dude.
Coming with Justin Tucker, but Alabama really didn't sustain that many drives. To be fair, Michigan didn't really either, but I was more confident that Michigan would be able to. I mean, that first half drive, the scoring drive that really kind of eased concerns, that was the march I was talking about, and it happened again at the end of the game.
Yeah, 100%. One question that was posed to me earlier today, and I kind of want to hear your thoughts on, do you think that if, in an alternate universe where Georgia is in this game, Georgia somehow sneaks into the 4 seed, the committee values Georgia, do you think Georgia has a better chance of beating Michigan than Alabama did?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I think Georgia, the way Michigan played that game, Georgia probably beats Michigan.
Okay, yeah, and that was my thought too.
I always thought there was a pretty big gap between Georgia and Alabama, and even Alabama winning in the SEC title game didn't really like move me off of that. It wasn't like oh, I'm wrong. Yeah. It was just Alabama wins that game, and they had a few breaks along the way.
Yeah, 100%. Like that was my takeaway with how mistake laden Michigan's game was in the Rose Bowl. Kirby Smart, Carson Beck, and the explosiveness of that Georgia offense, because I think to beat Michigan, it takes an explosive and well-balanced offense. And obviously, like we've been talking about all season and particularly previewing that game, Alabama doesn't have that. Georgia does, and Georgia would be able to take advantage of those short fields, those mistakes much more routinely than Alabama was.
Absolutely. And before we move on to the Sugar Bowl, let me tell you about DraftKings new user bonus. DraftKings is offering a fantastic sign-up bonus for new users. You can place a $5 first bet on anything to instantly claim $150 in bonus bets. You will also be rewarded with a separate no-sweat single-game parlay every single day when you opt in. The best part about this is you will receive both rewards even if your first bet loses. You literally just have to sign up to qualify for these bonuses. All you have to do is join DraftKings, and when you do, sign up with our code STB, Stack in the Box. Again, use our code STB. Not only gets you these great bonuses, but it also directly supports our podcast. If you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, make sure to use the code STB to maximize your first bet and parlays. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 or older and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check out the episode description below for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. Again, use the promo code STB with our proud sponsor, DraftKings. Sugar Bowl. Washington hangs on to beat Texas 37-31. Before we talk about the full game, I'd like to talk about the end of the game. We could go back in time because I think as the end of the game was happening, I had already decided if Texas were to score, it would be probably the single biggest meltdown I have ever seen in my entire life, given the stakes of the game. For those that need a little bit of catching up, Washington had Texas on the ropes. They get into the red zone with about 3 minutes left. Texas begins to use their timeouts, as teams typically do. They had 3 timeouts. They were going to try and maximize how much time left. Texas used the timeout on Washington's second down run. It's like 3rd and 8 now. At the Texas, 17, Washington leading by 6. Washington opts to throw. Of course, play breaks down. They throw the ball away, so the clock stops. So Texas is able to maintain 2 timeouts with about 3 minutes left. Washington makes the kick, goes up 9. Texas rolls down the field and settles for 3, so it's a 6-point game. Then Washington gets the ball back and goes 3 and out again, but Texas saves even more time here because Washington's running back, Dylan Johnson, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, he gets what seems to be seriously hurt. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but he can't get up and run off the field. So Washington needs to burn their timeout. So Texas has about 45 seconds to go down the field after a penalty by Washington. Texas gets to inside the red zone and fails to score on 4 opportunities from there. So Washington escapes 37-31. I think they were the better team. I think it was a pretty poor effort from Texas, especially game plan-wise. I think Texas really kind of left a few things out there. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Cody, but I think I'm not going to say Washington's a better team or anything like that, but it felt like Texas dug themselves a little bit of a hole too early and let Washington pick up a head of steam that they weren't going to be able to slow down. And that was ultimately the difference in the game, was kind of the early start where Texas, in my opinion, too many empty possessions to win a game of that magnitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Early in the game, I thought that one thing I had said, previewing the contest was I thought that having a month to prepare would really help the Texas run game without Jonathan Brooks, find their footing with Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter. And I thought early in the game we saw that they were having, pretty decent success running the football, but then they weren't able to finish drives. And then Washington was able to, convert pretty often early in the first half. And in doing so, Texas fell behind a little bit and they had to kind of abandon the running game, I thought, a little too much. And I thought that really affected their game plan, especially because Washington, which is, I will admit fully, is not something that I expected to say coming out of this game. Braylon Trice absolutely wrecked this game. I've touted Texas's offensive line all season, and Braylon Trice had 7 pressures in this game. He was in the backfield constantly harassing Quinn Ewers and getting him off platform, off schedule in his throws, and the Texas passing game really suffered because of it. I would still venture to guess that, if these two teams played 10 times on neutral site, I'm still taking Texas the majority of the time. But Washington on Monday night, they played the better game. They were the better team on Monday night.
Yeah, I think abandoning I think Sark, if he's rewatching this game, is probably like we got away from the run too much. And I know it didn't help that there were 2 fumbles by running backs in this one. Obviously, the loss of Jonathan Brooks playing a role. But, you look at some of the numbers for Texas run game. It felt like they were getting 5-6 yards down the field before even being touched by a Washington defender. Those were the kind of holes that were being opened up for the likes of CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue. Texas had an EPA per rush of 0.44. That would be 96th percentile compared to games last season. So Washington, which we mentioned in the preview, is a porous rush defense. They are bottom 15 in terms of EPA per rush allowed, rushing success rate allowed, defensive line yards. It was there. It was there for Texas. They moved up and down the field. It felt like they were a little too eager to get the passing game going, and Quinn Ewers did not play his best, in my opinion.
No.
24 of 43, 318 yards. A lot of that honestly came on the final 2 drives. So I don't have those numbers, but like the numbers look better than what it actually was. I thought Quinn Ewers played a pretty mediocre game, in my opinion. Was not a difference maker whatsoever. I think, to me, Sarkisian's probably sitting there like, we probably could have won this game. We probably wasted too many possessions here. That being said, on the other side, Washington deserves a ton of credit for taking advantage of a weak Texas secondary. I had mentioned in our preview why I like the over in the game and why I thought Washington was ultimately going to win was because I thought Texas secondary was a big issue, and Michael Penix played one of the best games I've watched. An absolute masterclass. Like,
it really was.
Dots everywhere. Was just like picking a spot and just throwing the ball like on a dime. It was unbelievable. 29 of 38, 430 yards and 2 touchdowns. Washington averaged over 11 yards per drop back. They were just chucking the ball down the field and taking full advantage of a Texas secondary. I think Washington deserves a ton of credit. Cody, any other thoughts on this game? Is this something that you think can be replicated in the national championship game?
Potentially, because the one thing that really stood out to me with Penix, and we've seen it at times this year, but not consistently. But I talked about Braylon Trice and Quinn Ewers really struggling. I felt like, under duress a little bit. I think that Penix handled pressure better than I've seen a college quarterback do in the entire season, especially one who's not really particularly mobile. Like, his ability to navigate the pocket, reset, and then make a strong throw consistently in this game, because Texas was able to get some pressure against this, Joe Moore Award winning offensive line for Washington. And it didn't matter because Penix would just adjust, reset, and make a strong throw. And to me, that's what this game came down to. The other thing I do want to bring up, I'm going to tee you up a little bit. One thing that you have been talking about all season is Texas's red zone inefficiency. And when they got into the red zone on that final drive, I was like, well, are they going to overcome it? Are they going to crumble? And they obviously crumbled. And it got me thinking, we have the utmost respect for Steve Sarkisian as a play caller, as a schematic mind. But I wonder if part of it is Sarkisian's play calling in the red zone is like his next stage of development to take the next step for Texas and for him to take the next step as a head coach. Because frankly, that play calling in the red zone on those final 4 plays was wholly uninspired.
Yeah. And it was also because it's not that Texas went down. I'm talking now the drive prior to the final one.
Yeah.
Texas down 9, got down the field very quickly. And it's not that they did the on first down, take a quick field goal to maximize how much time they'll have later. Texas ran a real red zone drive to try and score a touchdown. It's not like they were like, okay, we have to kick a field goal and score a touchdown. We're just going to take the field goal first and get the touchdown later. No, they actually on 4th down kicked a chip shot field goal. So they actually failed twice to score a touchdown when they needed it at least once. So I do think that I was concerned about it. I thought it was one of those edges that Washington could possibly maximize. I mean, Washington, they weren't a good red zone defense to begin with, and they showed up when they buckled down when it was most necessary. So it was a nice to kind of nail a key part of the game like that, something that concerned me, and it ended up playing a huge role. So definitely. that was nice. I do want to though talk some national championship though, because I think while Texas obviously we could talk about how they let that one go in Alabama, they had some fundamental flaws. I think now we're hungry to talk about this one. Michigan laying 4.5, total of 55.5 in the national championship game. This game will be Monday night in Houston, Texas. I mean, there's a bunch of ways to go in this one. Cody, I will let you start off this breakdown. What are some of the key thoughts you have heading into this game that you want to discuss?
So I'm going to start with the Michigan offense. And like we've already mentioned in this show and mentioned basically all season, Washington's run defense is extremely porous, and it can be taken advantage of. Texas was, and they got away from it. Sharon Moore, Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, they're not going to get away from it. They are going to pound the rock with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Honestly, if they continue having success at the level that Texas was early in this game, early in the Sugar Bowl, against Washington's defense, if Michigan is able to attain that level of success, I could see a game similar to what we saw at the end of the regular season with JJ McCarthy, where he's throwing, sub 15 pass attempts in this game, where they're just content breaking off 7 yards per rush and not worrying about it and controlling the game in that way. But I also think that it lends itself to potentially explosive plays in the run game. We've seen Corum and Edwards in games in years past and also at times this year break off some explosive runs and really break the game open and get the scoring going quickly. And I think that's going to be the tone setter, but I also think that it's something that, while I think that Michigan's coaching staff is more than willing to rely heavily and almost solely on that game plan, I do think that Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix Jr., I think that their game plan is going to be to try and ramp up the pressure to try and force Michigan off of their spot.
Yeah, I think watching the Texas game made me a little nervous for Washington in this one.
Yeah.
Because there's arguably no more disciplined team than Michigan. Mm-hmm. They are going to do what they do, and they are going to do it better than any other team in the country. Yeah. I agree with you. I think there's a world where if this team gets ahead, like JJ McCarthy might not throw a pass in like the second half. It gives me a lot of Penn State vibes where Michigan is going to try and play ball control. They're going to try and keep the other team on the sideline and go up and down the field. Now, Penn State had a top 5 defense. Washington doesn't have that. The secondary's got a much better, but I mentioned it before, 96 percentile EPA per rush for Texas. They were going up and down the field. They averaged north of 7 yards per carry in that game. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, I think Michigan, while Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards were explosive, they are not the same guys they were last year.
That's true.
This team isn't super explosive run based. They want to go like up and they're almost like a service academy in how they attack on offense. Now, some of that is due to being ahead and being so far superior to most of their opponents that they just keep it so vanilla, it doesn't even matter. But Michigan is 71st in EPA per rush this season and like only around the national average in the 50s in terms of yards per carry. They're not ripping off like 9-10 yards. It's the 5-6 yard runs that build up over time. Michigan plays at the 3rd slowest pace in the country. I think Michigan is going to say, hey, Blake, one, he doesn't have the getaway speed anymore, but I think they're going to say, hey, we want 7-minute drives. We want 8-minute. We want Penix on the sideline. We are not going to try and have this game get into the 30s. We want to win in the mid-20s and keep Washington off the field as much as possible, limit their possessions. So I think Michigan against this Washington defensive line is going to try and play man ball, soften them up, take timely deep shots when necessary with the play action. But I think Michigan, I think they're going to be able to get what they want in this game on offense. Now, what happens if they fall behind like Texas did? It's a fair point. I think, will J.J. McCarthy respond to being put into a pass-first script? It's a fair question to have, and I think it's probably the path to success for Washington is make this team have to take to the air. Washington secondary is definitely the stronger part of the defense with Muhammad, who got hurt at the end of the game, but he played on the final snap, so he should be good to go. I'm most curious, like you said, what happens if J.J. McCarthy needs to throw the ball 35 to 40 times and the Wolverines have to get into the 30s?
Yeah, so when I was digging into the PFF grading and numbers and coverage numbers from the Texas game, one thing that stood out to me with Washington's defense, and I think it plays into the hands of Michigan a little bit in this game, if they do have to go to a pass script, which, again, I don't think is ideally what they want to do, but Texas was able to take advantage of the middle of the field a little bit. the Washington linebackers and the Washington safeties actually struggled a little bit in coverage against Texas. And when you look at Roman Wilson, when you look at Loveland, the tight end, and Barner, the other tight end from Michigan, they're very effective in those intermediate middle parts of the field. And so, like, I think that it may not be an explosive passing offense if they get into a pass script, but I think there is something to be had there for the Michigan passing offense, even if they are forced to throw more than they want to.
I completely agree. I do think Michigan is content, though. Like,
absolutely.
I think if they have to throw, it will be there. I think they're definitely not as confident, but like, I think there are a ton of questions on both sides. What I am most confident, though, is that Michigan will have success on the ground. I don't see Washington, who has faced some pretty strong rush offenses, including Texas in the Sugar Bowl. They faced Oregon State, who had a high EPA per rush grade. They faced Oregon, who was able to move the ball on them. Like, I don't see a world where Washington is shutting down Michigan's offense. I really don't. So I do think Michigan's offense should be able to find plenty of success, especially in its preferred state. On the other side, look, I'm not going to say this Washington offense is going to get shut down by Michigan, but I will say this is arguably the best defense in the country. This is a far tougher test than any sort of defense Washington has seen in the Pac-12 this season. I tried to look for a comparison, like I guess Oregon, but Michigan is number 2 in pass rush grade per PFF. Oregon's 45th. Like, I know that this is like a more award-winning offensive line for Washington, but this is a different test. Like, this is one of the best defense in the country. I know that there's something to be said for, well, Ohio State was able to kind of get it going in the passing game, in the game with Marvin Harrison Jr. The past 2 seasons, MHJ had over 100 yards receiving, and Ohio State was able to put up some points. That's fair. I'm a little concerned that Washington is going to be really behind the sticks here, and it's going to be obvious passing situations, and Michigan's going to be able to win without sending extra pressure. They could drop guys in coverage, and it's going to be 3rd and 10, and one of those, again, can you sustain drives against Michigan? Michigan over the course of the season has allowed less than 1 point per drive. Like, this team doesn't allow points. This team doesn't allow explosive plays. So I just wonder what happens if Washington isn't able to get ahead of schedule and able to hit those deep shots, because Michigan's secondary is far better than Texas's, in my opinion. It's definitely more veteran-laden. So one more point, though, because I kind of glossed over it, but the run game, Dylan Johnson left with a leg injury that he's been battling for going on months now.
Yeah.
Got carted off the field. Offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb said it wasn't that serious. X-rays were negative, and he's going to play on Monday. Look, I'm not sure he's going to play. I'm just saying, like, if he plays, that's great. I am proceeding that he's going to be at the very least limited. And if he's even playing, they did nothing on the ground, Washington, in the Sugar Bowl. Texas, who has a stout defensive line as well, absolutely shut it down. This was all on Penix's arm. In that game, Washington averaged only 3.29 yards per carry. Yeah. I believe that Washington's run game is going to be non-existent in this game as well. And I think, again, it's going to fall on Michael Penix's shoulders. Look, can he have another big game? Absolutely. I'm just a little concerned that he will.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I tend to agree with every point you're making. However, if I have any points of trepidation about Michigan's defense, they have not faced an offense that has the depth of weapons that Washington does. They have not faced an offense. I mean, Washington, to me, is by far the best offense that they have seen this entire season. And we talk about their high coverage grade. Outside of Ohio State, who have they played that has a set of wide receivers that is anywhere markedly close to what Washington can offer, with 3 probably top 100 picks at wide receiver in this upcoming NFL draft? Rome Odunze might be as good, if not better, than Marvin Harrison Jr. So they have that like alpha stud. But Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, they are 2A and 2B. Like, they are absolute studs. And I do wonder if Michigan's coverage, it is a veteran secondary, but this is a different animal that they're going to be facing in this game on a fast track in a dome in Houston at NRG Stadium. So if I am going to make the case for Washington, which I'm not sure I'm going to, but I do think Washington will have some offensive success, especially after what I mentioned earlier with Penix's ability to handle and navigate pressure within the pocket, reset quickly, and then get the ball out quickly. Not only do I think that the receivers are going to be open if he can stay clean and get the throws off, but I also think that DeBoer and Grubb, for that matter, are smart enough offensive minds that they're not necessarily going to be trying to hit, they're not going to be big play merchants necessarily for this entire game. I think they're smart enough. They're going to get at least one or two guys open or out of their breaks early. So they're open for if pressure gets there, Penix can get the ball out quickly. So I do think Washington is going to be able to move the ball some in this game because I am a little bit dubious of if Michigan's secondary is as good as the metrics say based on level of competition.
It's fair. Jack Westover, the tight end, I think he could have before we talk player props, he's a guy I've circled as a potential target, especially if we think Michigan's able to get some pressure, work underneath to the tight end. Westover, I think he had 50-something yards in the Sugar Bowl here ever. Yeah, Westover, 6 catches, 59 yards on 8 targets. So
yeah, he was a big factor too.
Yeah, so I could see if they have to work underneath. But again, I'm just a little concerned about if you're not going to get down the field in 2 minutes and 6 plays, is it a matter of time before Washington falls behind the sticks and Michigan gets some pressure and all of a sudden it's 3rd and long and then that's how they get off the field? It's something I'm a little concerned about because Washington, for as much as the success that they had in that game, and they put up 37 points against Texas, a lot of settling for field goals there. A lot of fourth and I know they went for it once in the red zone and they didn't get it. I'm a little concerned that field goals aren't going to win you this one when you're going up against a potent offense like Michigan that could kind of keep you on the sidelines and really stay ahead of schedule and really convert from in close. Washington, it seemed like in that game against Texas, it kind of got a little shaky inside the red zone.
No, 100%. I do think that with everything we're saying about this game, and I guess this is kind of like an overarching point I want to make, but I don't see a world where this game is a blowout. It may be relatively one-sided, but I don't think it's going to be 65-7. Obviously not 65-7, but anything that's an absolute blowout, which I think has it we'll put it in the conversation of the best 4-team college football playoff that we'll have seen. Because normally out of the 3 games, the 2 semifinals and national championship game, we always have gotten one dud. There's been one dud. Last year it was the national championship game. The year before that it was Alabama-Cincinnati. I don't think this game is going to be a blowout. Even if Michigan dominates, the way that it seems like you're leaning that they're going to dominate. I still don't think Michigan is the type of team that's going to blow out a team 41-14 or anything like that. I don't think they have that in them necessarily.
It's a fair point. I'm definitely leaning with the Michigan side, but it's not a strong conviction level on that. I just think that there's more avenues to them having success on both sides of the ball. And then one last point before we kind of talk best bets and player props and everything. So watching the Sugar Bowl, Texas had a lot of backbreaking penalties. It felt like it felt like Texas was putting itself in danger at all times. 10 penalties for a team that's usually around the national average in terms of penalty yardage per game. Washington, 5 flags for 39 yards. And this is a Washington, and that includes that egregious fair catch interference. So really only 4 flags over the majority of the game. Do you know that Washington has been penalized yardage-wise the second most per game this entire season in the entire country?
I did not.
Only New Mexico is tacked for more penalty yards per game. Would you like to know where Michigan ranks?
I would assume it's in the top 5 because Jim Harbaugh wouldn't have it any other way.
Second fewest penalty yards per game. So you have the second most versus the second fewest. In a game that might be really tight and nervy, and there are a lot of questions for both sides in terms of how these two teams kind of match up against one another, I feel like that could play a huge role in this one, especially though with a Michigan defense that has a ferocious pass rush. Could you see maybe a few holding penalties on the Washington side? Look, maybe I'm kind of pulling at straws here, but I do feel like after a really clean game for a team that over the balance of the season has proven to be pretty undisciplined, I feel like you're due to get some regression back. And the same can be said for Michigan. All those special teams blunders in the regular season, Michigan was 14th in PFF special teams grade. So, like, a normally elite Michigan special teams. Like, you think they're going to play that bad again?
I mean, it's possible.
It's definitely possible, but like I feel like the law of averages seems to it will balance itself out over.
Right.
And look, again, it's random, and these are a lot of things that I'm like saying, but like, don't be surprised if Washington finds themselves picking up like stupid penalties left and right, and like unnecessary holdings and stuff like that. And for Michigan, their special teams works out, and their punter punts incredibly better because he was honestly incredibly poor given what he's been in the entire season. So those are two things that I think are being not talked about as much that might rear its head as the game goes on next Monday night.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up special teams as my final point because Michigan, yes, over the course of the season, obviously a great special teams team, but so is Washington. Actually grades out better in PFF. They're 12th in special teams grade this season.
Yes.
And so if it doesn't, positively regress to the mean for Michigan on special teams, and they do make those special teams mistakes, Washington is going to have the advantage in there. And that could be a key area if Michigan doesn't clean it up, if it's, their special teams is something that slips through the cracks in these high pressure, high leverage situations, then perhaps that's an area where Washington can find some field position breaks, some ways to break what Michigan wants to do. So force some mistakes and garner some extra possession. So that special teams is actually, I think, a really, really key thing to, if Michigan doesn't clean up, it's something that could really even the playing field in this game.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's talk some best bets here. Or I guess we'll do player props first, and then we'll give like final predictions and everything. Player props are starting to trickle out across the domestic sports books. Cody, I know you have our proud sponsor, DraftKings. You have them up, so maybe I'll lean on you to kind of shout out the ones I was eyeing. I'll lead us off. I have two really. I have three kind of at the top of my mind, not necessarily plays, but just my thoughts on how this game could play out. First is JJ McCarthy over rushing yards.
Okay.
It was one that hit in the Rose Bowl. It was around 17.5, 18.5. He got to around 20. Didn't run much, but I think given the likely game script here, and I believe Washington's inability to stop the run, I think you could see JJ, who looked fully healthy after being banged up at the end of the season. I think, getting into the mid-20s is fairly reasonable. Again, he only had, I think it was like only 3 runs in the Bama game. Yeah. Playing a much softer defensive line against the run, I think that could set up really nicely for him to take a few off. So I like McCarthy over rushing yards in like that lowish 20 range.
Yeah, it's 21.5 on DraftKings. So that's right in that range that you're talking about. So I also had that one circled. I think that his legs are going to be important in this game. And more importantly, like you said, he looked healthy. That was a big factor. I was wondering, if there are going to be any effects. I'm going to stay on the Michigan side for mine. And this is a high value prop, but I think with the run heavy script that you and I are both expecting from Michigan, Donovan Edwards over basically to score a touchdown over 0.5 TDs is plus 225 at DraftKings. And if we're going to see this rush heavy attack, we are going to see the load split. Yes, Blake Corum is going to get the lion's share of the carries, but he is going to have to get spelled. Blake Corum can't carry the ball, 8 times in a row. He's going to get tired, and they're going to spell him for Donovan Edwards. So if they drive the ball and they get in the red zone, Blake Corum's tired, I think plus 225 is good value for someone who I think is going to get touches in that red zone situation.
So I agree. Edwards, he's kind of, in my opinion, been really underwhelming this season after being like a jitterbug running back last year. He was lights out. He really, in my opinion, has underwhelmed. I was looking a little bit different. I don't hate the idea at all. My look was actually at his receiving yards prop.
Ooh, okay.
I mean, listen, it's been hit or miss in terms of his usage, but you're talking a handful of times this season. He has 34 targets on the year, and a lot of them have been condensed to the same game. You're talking Iowa had 4 targets against Ohio State. He had 2 targets going back, and then he went through Maryland, Penn State without any targets. And then in the beginning of Big Ten play, 3 targets against Purdue, 3 against Michigan State, 2 against Indiana, 4 against Minnesota. It should be in the low teens range.
15 if it's and a half.
10 and a half?
15 and a half.
15 and a half. I just think if Michigan's going to play this super vanilla script, if we think Michigan's going to play from ahead, what about like one slip screen to Edwards because he's more of the pass catching back anyway than Corum. I just wonder if Edwards could maybe rip one off, and that's how they look to get him going, maybe on like a swing pass or a screen pass. Again, 15.5, you need pretty much one like nice reception, and then a second one to get you over. So I like Donovan Edwards receiving yards. I don't hate the touchdown look though.
No, I like that as well. I think Edwards is a real key in this game who the prop market it seems to me is overlooking a little bit because Corum is obviously going to see the heavier workload in this game, but I think he is going to have usage with the game script that we're seeing. I'll move on to the Washington side of things. And you actually mentioned it. Jack Westover over 24.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I like
that total is way too low. He is going to play a factor, especially with the pressure that Michigan is going to put on there. And with my respect for DeBoer and Grubb as offensive minds, they are going to get guys in space in the short and intermediate areas so Penix can get the ball out quickly. And when they did that against Texas, Westover was wide the frick open every single time. And so 24.5 with the way, if it's anything similar to what he did against Texas, he's there with 3 receptions.
Yeah, 100%. I like that one quite a bit. So that was going to be my other one. One other one I want to ask you, Penix rushing yards. Is that available?
Yeah, let me look it up. I do not have it written down, but I believe it is available. No, it's not actually available in DraftKings. Is it on FanDuel either?
Because I was curious what that number was going to be because he's not typically a runner, but he did against Texas. Again, though, sacks count against you in college, not in the NFL. So I was just curious what that number was going to be. Typically, this is obviously because player props are more prominent in the NFL, but like playoff games with quarterback rush yards is like typically a nice one to play just because like quarterbacks are more inclined to keep the ball, take off themselves, kind of take what the defense is giving you. So we saw Penix. If he had a rush yard prop last week against Texas, he absolutely hit it. That I'm for sure of. So it was just one I was curious about. But Cody, any other player props you want to get to before we move on to our final predictions?
Yeah, actually, fittingly, I'm going to stay with Penix in the pass yards. I don't feel this one as strongly as I do the other 3 that I've mentioned, but I do think that I lean to his over 291.5 passing yards because I think it's going to be I think any way that this game script plays out, we're still going to see Penix put up good passing yards numbers. Even if Michigan puts Washington in an extremely negative game script where they're playing from behind and having to chuck it all over, I think we could see, in the third and fourth quarter when Michigan has a big lead, Penix does basically what Quinn Ewers did in the Sugar Bowl, where he pads his stats at the end of the game. And 291.5 with how heavily Washington is going to have to throw the ball to have success in this game, I think that's a low total, especially for a player who we've seen when he is healthy, which he seemed to be pretty dang healthy in the Texas game, especially when healthy, routinely get over 300 yards.
Yeah, I like it. All right. Best bets, final picks. Really quick before we get to that, bowl picks. I went 23-18. I think I finished on like a heater.
You absolutely did. You were hot on New Year's Day, dude.
Yeah, that I ended strong. It was a rough start for sure. And then Cody, 18-22 and 1 for you. So you win the regular season. I get you in bowl games. I don't have the final tally in front of me, but we got some work to do for next year for sure. So we got to pick it up a little bit. But final best bets, final prediction. I want your best bet. I want a prediction on who wins and a final score just for funsies.
Okay, so my best bet is the over 55.5. I've kind of hinted at it. I think Washington is able to find success offensively. More importantly, I think they are able to combat what Michigan wants to do in this game. Like you said, Michigan wants to have those 6, 7, 8-minute drives, and I think they are going to be able to have those. But I also think, despite what we've seen from Corum and Edwards this year, like you said, they have regressed from being as explosive as they were a year ago. I still think they find some explosive plays in the run game. It might even be McCarthy breaking off a big run in the run game. Like, I just think that Michigan finds some explosive plays with how porous Washington's run defense is and with how reliant Michigan's going to be on that side of the ball. But I think with what I've said about DeBoer and Grubb targeting the middle of the field and getting Penix to get the ball out quickly, and the way Penix handled pressure in the Sugar Bowl, I think that Washington does its part to get on the board enough to get us to the over 55.5, especially on a fast track at NRG Stadium where And typically in national championship games in recent years, we have seen the over or high point totals there. And with a lower-ish total, especially for a game that Washington's involved in, I like the over.
Who wins?
So winning, this is a head and a heart situation because my head and everything I'm looking at tells me that Michigan's going to win. My heart says, how in the world can you bet against this Washington team? But I'm going to go Michigan 34, Washington 27.
High scoring.
Yeah.
We are looking at this a little bit differently because I like the under 55.5. I think while I respect Washington's offense quite a bit, I just think there's going to be such few possessions due to both teams wanting to keep the opposing offense off the field. I don't think either offense is really going to be able to hit explosive plays in this one. I think it's going to be, again, who could sustain long time consuming drives, and with limited possessions means limited points. So I went under here. It's tough, and like I might look really stupid, but I think Michigan wins this one like 27-17.
Okay.
I think that Washington finds itself a little overwhelmed with the defensive line of Michigan. They're not able to establish the run and get into a favorable down and distance, and the deep ball isn't there. And all of a sudden it becomes 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9, or a hold, and it's like 3rd and 17. And Washington's going to have to punt the ball away. And then Michigan could go on these marches where 6-7 minutes come off the clock. Washington might be able to get a few, but I just think Michigan's able to dictate this game from a time perspective, and also by running their offense and keeping the ball on the ground. So I like Michigan in this game. When it comes to like the spread, like I'm good. I'm not
absolutely.
Yeah,
I should have added that.
I'm not looking to like lay it with Michigan or something like that because I do, like you mentioned earlier, like Washington can maybe get like that late score and go from down 10 to down 3. But I do ultimately think Michigan, and Cody, I've been on the show for months now saying I think Michigan's the best team, and I do think there's something to be said that they kind of got over the hump against Alabama, and that might have been kind of getting the monkey off their back. And this is a much more favorable matchup for them, in my opinion, than against Alabama, where, yes, Washington has the high-octane passing attack, but they don't have the studs that Bama does, and they don't have the size and physicality that Bama does. So I think there's a chance that Michigan's able to kind of dictate this team and suffocate them. So I'll go 27-17 Wolverines.
I like it. I mean, I'm not like in terms of my actual plays that I'm making. You made me, pick a side, pick a final score. I'm not touching the side. I could go either way. And doubting Washington, if you've doubted Washington at all this season, it's not been profitable.
Yeah.
And so, like, doubting them again, I'm not going to be fooled to get into that, even though I think that you're right. I think the matchup does favor Michigan, but I can't full-throatedly go after a side in this game.
Yeah, and that will do it. So we will see. There won't be any recap episode, but make sure you are staying tuned into the Stack in the Box channel. There will be NFL playoff coverage when it's that time of year. It's the draft combine. It's the NFL draft. Me and Cody will be back in some form or fashion with Sterling and Ian, the NFL guys, talking, giving our college football expertise for those that have listened throughout the entire season and have supported the show. Thank you. You guys
absolutely
make it very easy to do it for us. We really appreciate you guys. The numbers have been going up all season long, and we really appreciate all the support we've been getting throughout the show. Cody, great co-host, great co-pilot. Wouldn't want to do it with anybody else, so I appreciate you sitting through, listening to me rant all the time, but it's been a lot of fun doing it.
Hey, man, wouldn't rather have anyone else at the controls guiding me along than you, man. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy the national championship game. Good luck with all the bets. We will see you sometime in the future. Who knows when, but seriously, enjoy the game and enjoy the college football offseason. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you.